of seconds, what began as a routine flight from Ahmedabad to London turned into one of India's deadliest aviation disasters. As investigators piece together what went wrong mechanically, families of victims are still haunted by a devastating question. What did their loved ones on board go through in those final seconds? Were they conscious when the plane hit? To answer that, we spoke to multiple experts who unpacked the biological reality of a high impact crash. Let's understand what the brain experiences in those final moments. According to experts, as the aircraft begins its uncontrolled descent, the brain activates primitive survival mechanisms. The human body releases adrenaline due to extreme fear. In the final seconds before the high impact crash, the human body enters a state of extreme stress. Adrenaline is released, heart rate spikes, breathing becomes rapid, and muscles tense up. Mentally, people may experience heightened alertness or paradoxical calm. People may experience racing thoughts, tunnel vision, or even a strange sense of calm or detachment. Time can feel like it slows down. The reality is that in a high impact scenario, the brain does not have the time to process the feeling of pain or fear for long. But do victims remain conscious before the plane caught fire? When the aircraft hits, the brain suffers severe physical trauma. The result or consequence depends on the speed and angle of the impact, the location of the individual in the aircraft, and whether that person was wearing any protective equipment such as seat belts. The brain is considered, as we know, a very vulnerable organ, and in a sudden impact of violent deceleration, there is a possibility that the brain can slam against the skull. The brain is considered very vulnerable, and in a sudden impact of violent deceleration, there is a possibility that the brain can slam against the skull, causing a very serious injury. Doctors tell us there are high chances that the majority of people would have lost consciousness before the plane caught fire in this case. Reason is the height and speed would cause huge trauma to the brain and other parts of human body. Only a small proportion of people could have been aware till the last moment, but otherwise, many would have already lost their senses. In cases of slow but progressive loss of air cabin pressure, victims may remain conscious during descent until impact. But rapid fall in cabin air pressure can cause loss of consciousness within seconds due to sudden hypoxia. This happened with Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, which in 2014 was hit by a missile at high altitude. The air pressure was lost immediately and the aircraft broke apart mid-air. Now in case of Air France flight 447 in 2009, the aircraft stalled mid-air and took over 3 minutes to descend. Here investigators believed the passengers were all aware during the fall and this would have intensified their psychological trauma. But in Air India's latest crash incident, things happened so fast that no one really had time to realize the plane was going down.
Aviation disasters are not very common because they follow rigorous protocol. And when such disasters do happen, then certain events happen which are very specific to aviation, those who are flying in those planes. So we can divide it accordingly as just before the main impact, during the impact, and then what happens later, or what people say what happens in the waiting room, not to the passengers but to people who are the relatives or the loved ones. So just before the impact, so if the plane is decelerating at a very high speed, then the effects are almost similar to what the fighter pilots often encounter, like the G forces may come into play. So the pilot also faces significant stress, which includes hypoxia, which may lead to tunnel vision, which may lead to loss of consciousness. Same things can happen to the passengers when they are decelerating very fast. So that would lead to sudden unconsciousness. However, if the plane is decelerating very slowly, then consciousness will remain intact until the time of impact. So at the time of impact, there will be traumatic brain injury because now the decelerating force is now coupled into the organs of the body. So, as with any other head injuries or trauma, there will be traumatic brain injury, which can be in the form of just simple fractures to the skull or injury to the brain, such as concussions or contusions or intracranial hemorrhages. These will later on, from minutes to maybe hours, lead to brain swelling. So, in terms of neurosurgical perspective, the survivors need to be immediately assessed for head injuries. Along with head injuries, there can also be injuries to other organs of the body. These are injuries which need urgent attention by the medical and the emergency services. At the time of impact, these are one of the forms of injuries, and uh, unfortunately, if these injuries are severe enough, then the loss of life is quite inevitable. Uh, this is what happens to the passengers if unfortunately they are in such a major accident. If, however, the deceleration is very slow, then the consciousness will remain unimpaired, and then at the time of impact, people lose consciousness. So, this is one aspect of it. The other aspect is the waiting room stress. This is the stress which is actually encountered by the loved ones and people all around who are looking for their relatives and who are very concerned. So here the WHO, Red Cross, and many such organizations have actually defined how to look after these people. So we should be aware that there is something called psychological first aid, where people and healthcare professionals and the administration concerned are trained to look after these individuals, and there is a set protocol. So we should understand that when such disasters happen, it is not just the people who are in the plane who are affected, but also those who are outside and waiting who are significantly affected. And as a society and as healthcare professions, we should be aware of all these and do our best to reach out and help them in their sufferings.
Experts told News 18 that in the aftermath of the Air India disaster, understanding the brutal reality of what happened internally can help shape compassionate responses to design a support mechanism for families and also for the sole survivor, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, along with guiding aviation safety reforms for the future.